Hello, everyone. Today I got to sit down with Raizel Devorah, who is a healer and educator specializing in holistic wellness, energetic healing, and deep relational work. She's trained in the five elements of acupuncture, and she combines this ancient practice with modern modalities and also the sefirot and Kabbalah. As a relationship specialist, she guides women and couples to reconnect with their spiritual essence, often weaving Torah-based insights and mystical wisdom in her teachings. Raizel Devorah actually has her own podcasts and guided meditation and spiritual classes. Her rooted approach honors both Jewish tradition and holistic healing, empowering individuals to embody their worth, embrace themselves, and cultivate profound connections. I love this conversation, and I know you guys will too. A Soul Grows in Israel, a podcast where we ask the questions about ancient Jewish wisdom, modern life, and everything in between. So let's ask, let's have fun, and let's grow together. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Soul Grows in Israel. And today I am so happy to have Raizel Devorah, who apparently is really a legend in her own right and does so much good work out here in the community. And I would love to pick your brain. Raizel Devorah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. So before we really dig in, can you just tell us, I know you do really two very different things, and I wonder if they can be unified. I know you do a lot of this acupuncture work that has a lot to do with the spirit of Kabbalah, which already piqued my interest in a very big way, but also you're dealing with relationships. And I wanted to know some more details about how you go about your work.
Okay, so yes, there's a few things that I've brought together over time. The first thing I studied was called five element acupuncture,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's based on ancient Chinese wisdom. It's an ancient model. It's more like what was once upon a time and less like what most people are practicing in Chinese medicine nowadays. And we focus on the emotions and the peace, the inner peace of the spirit within the person. And that was step one for me. There's a lot that I can do with that. My specialty is what I seem to attract is the emotional realm,
Hmm.
emotional depression, anxiety, mood disorders. And then what kind of happened was people were asking if they could come with their spouse or they were sending their spouse. And relationships is probably at the heart of my passion,
Hmm.
which is relationship with self and other and then Hashem. So what I find is that one can't really have that ultimate relationship if the relationships on this earthly plane aren't harmonizing enough. So I began to study and look for things to study to help couples and eventually landed on something called RLT, Relational Life Therapy, which at this point, for me, I feel convinced is the best and most appropriate for the needs that relationships are facing in this time.
Wow. And then can I ask you, if let's just say someone's like, I only want to see a therapist who is certified with X, Y, and Z, what kind of comfort or assurance can you give clients that are interested in going in this really less traditional route, but obviously so helpful?
So what actually ends up happening is people come to me because they're tired of seeing therapists. They're tired of talking. They're tired of trying things, and they want to make progress in areas that they feel that the therapy isn't helping.
Wow.
And that's where needles can do things for people. The acupuncture can do things that talking can't. But then sometimes it goes in the opposite direction. Sometimes I hit a block with the client and what we're working on because of very deep-seated trauma in them. And part of my work is helping to address why they're suffering with whatever they're suffering, whether that's physical, emotional, or spirit level.
Hmm.
And when there's a very deep trauma, if it's if it's within my capacity, I work with them. But if I think they need trauma therapy, then I recommend them. But I use very specific models, like trauma therapy, not talk therapy at that
Yeah,
point.
that's actually such a reassurance. I understand. So people are putting their faith in you and you're able to defer when it's just too big for what you're doing. And I think that's actually quite comforting, personally speaking. Okay. So let's just say you do have a client, if you could just walk us through it, who comes to you and like all of us, we're all like carrying baggage or trauma or whatever. And they're like, I don't know, just heal me. And they're laying there. Can you sense what's going on by how they're breathing or their body itself or tension that they're holding?
So what's my process and how am I gathering information? So at
Yeah.
this point, I've branched out from just five element acupuncture. So I'm also doing energy work, which is what you mentioned before, working with the sefirot.
Yes.
So at this point, there's two things going on at once. And I ask my clients to tell me before they book what they're coming for. And the options will be, and they'll note it in their form. The options will be acupuncture, energy work, inner child work, or relationship work.
Hmm.
So they get to know, and it could be all of the above. I'm gathering information through my five element lens, through the coloring in the skin, the sound within the voice, the presence in the body, that's through the eyes,
Wow.
even the smell that's coming off of them. And based on how they respond to the things I'm asking. So let's say I ask a question that's just a regular question, but suddenly they're almost tearing up,
Wow.
or suddenly they experience fear. I can feel and see what they're feeling through the way that their energy shifts. So that'll point me to go into a certain direction to look at why would that emotion come up in them inappropriately? And that's a sign of imbalance, inappropriate emotions
Yeah.
or emotions that are the wrong strength for what we're dealing with.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot here, just in our general life, just regular us who notice that we've overreacted to something. And I think that's always just another door to open up because normally we hope to be rational. And the second we are irrational, that's like, let's be curious and find out what's really hiding there. And maybe we have a chance. And it sounds like that's what you're doing really with senses. So you're becoming very, very
Right.
attuned to who is with you. Were you always
Yes.
spiritually sensitive in this way, or do you have to train to get to where you are?
No, I think I was always, but my process was I was always very, very sensitive to energy.
Hmm.
And then that's the other piece of what I'm doing. I'm gathering information about their energetic system, more to do with the sefirot and their whole system via the colors that show up or via what I see when I close my eyes when I'm with them.
Wow.
That'll show me too what's going on in them. And I can recall as early as about 1.5 before I could walk. So I was crawling. I could recall seeing light all around me, like the energy, which I see now as a grown up. And
Yeah.
I teach people how to see. But I can recall being very little and I couldn't walk. I was on my hands and knees. I remember my mother's legs. She was sitting on a couch, and I remember looking around and seeing light everywhere. And then at a certain point, that all disappeared, which is normal. Because when kids grow up and nobody talks about energy, then they just stop seeing it.
Yeah.
If we raise kids, like I raise my kids, talking about energy, it's natural. But for me, it all disappeared, and then I relearned how to see when I was around age 14, 15.
That's remarkable. I would imagine that you turn it off also subconsciously because it must be uncomfortable to be seeing things that no one's talking about, but no one else is really seeing. And there might be like this little voice, like, what's wrong with me? I wonder.
That could be.
I always wonder about spiritually sensitive people because I don't see light. I'm really far away from that. But I know, if I'm not mistaken, Rev Cook says everyone can be a prophet. In other words, in our own tiny
Yeah.
way, we can all sort of sense different vibes and energy. When I know specifically when my spouse, who I'm deeply connected to, when he's in a bad place, I can tell myself from today to tomorrow, like detach. This is his journey and it's not mine. I feel this dark cloud sort of coming over me also,
Mhm.
even though he has the right to go through his journey. Do you think people who are more maybe sensitive to the energy around them have a harder time filtering other people's moods?
Yes, definitely.
Hmm.
And I talk about this in the context of boundaries, and I also talk about it in the context of being empathic. And for me, another reason sometimes people turn off their ability to connect to energy is because it's too much for them.
Yeah.
So that's also a possibility at a young age. But what's happening when you feel that is you have your energetic system, your map. That's the structure of your soul is made up of the sefirot and the pipelines that connect them, and the Hebrew letters that sit on those pipelines.
Yeah.
So your energetic structure is connected to his energetic structure because you got halachically married. That formed a connection. There's energy that can pass between the two of you. You have this eternally.
Wow.
It's another reason why if a couple does find that they need to divorce, it's another reason why it's so hard to divorce properly, to disconnect, because they have shared this connection. And halacha addresses that also. We don't just sign a paper, there's a ritual
Wow.
to address it. And then sometimes, a lot of times, people need to do a lot of work to finish like any remnants of energetic connection. But that connection you also have with your kids, you
Mm.
have with your parents, your siblings. But there's something very powerful with the spouse because it was chosen.
Yes.
And so energy can just come right in. And we, all of us, need to learn how to either sometimes protect ourselves from another's ups and downs, whatever they're going through, or we need to learn how to manage being attached to someone else in that way.
Yep. It's such a struggle because I don't want to detach from my soulmate, who I find, thank God, he's my best friend. So I understand that that's such a privilege. But with that comes that feeling that if I detach, I'm less connected to this person. How do I do this properly? And you're mentioning we can work on it. And I guess on regal achad, on one leg, how could we go around that process where I want to stay connected to you, but I need to retain my own light or my own spiritual map, as you say?
Okay, that's hard on one leg
I
because
know.
the three things come automatically. So I'll spit out three things. One, development of self. The stronger the development of self in the person, the easier it gets. So this was something that was just so hard for me when I first got married, and year after year after year, it does get better.
Mm,
And it's hardest for children, obviously. And as we develop their sense of self, self in terms of higher identity, soul identity, the more we have that and we're centered in there, the more we can handle energetically. That's one. Two is energetic boundaries, creating just like a bubble of light around us, and or seeing like a grid, like a fence that we state with our intention. It protects us, but energy can come in, but it acts like a filter. So we're stating, hey, I love this person I'm connected to, or let's say a child is going through, I love my child through something, I love my child or even a close friend.
mm,
And I'm only choosing to take in the positive, and any negativity they're oozing out, I'm choosing to leave it outside my doorway, so to
yeah.
speak. I see them, I acknowledge it in them, but I'm not letting it into me. So there's a lot of intent there. The third is learning how to send energy back. No, thank you. This belongs to you. Here you go. And you send it back. And
Wow.
I do that regularly, a lot.
It's so funny because I think someone can hear this and be like, whatever, they're your spouse and love them. The biggest favor to the people I love is giving them the space to go through what they need to go through and still retaining my own self, like you described. Getting sucked in, and again, empaths, I'm sure, suffer from this more than anyone, but getting sucked into someone else's pain means you're both drowning. So I like to, as much as possible, be stable when I'm feeling stable and vice versa. When I'm having a weak moment, I don't want to pull anyone down with me. I think that that's too much responsibility, you know? So I think this work is
Yeah.
kind of life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And in relationship work, there's often a big emphasis on I should be taking responsibility and accountability, not just for my actions, but for how I feel,
Yes. Yes.
which isn't always easy. I'm the first to jump to that. When I'm in a mood, my first instinct is to share that mood with everyone around me.
Yep.
And that's boundary work. Because boundary work is, and I do a whole series of workshops on boundaries and the empath, seeing energy, working with energy. Boundary work in a nutshell isn't just that I'm protected from what's coming in, it's that I'm protected from what's in me going out.
Wow. That's another filter, like an output filter,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
So if you imagine the sefirot, I studied yoga many years ago in detail, and we had a lot of chakras, and I know that there are similarities, even though I so prefer things coming from our own Masora. It's also, for me, it's another safety net. Like I don't have to filter what came from something else, even though I think ultimately the truths universally are there. If,
Yes.
if I go through
Yes.
these sefirot, and you're mentioning filters, I wonder if I can get a bit more detailed. For example, if I would talk about maybe speech, for example, and filtering what's coming out of my mouth, how I'm sharing my mood with others through action or speech, and knowing that not everyone has to know my business in the house right now. I might just need space. Or someone else who doesn't maybe have a struggle with koach dibur, which is speech. How do you sort of navigate that and create filters for other people's maps, in essence?
Okay, so just through the lens of spirit work, what I do isn't, I can't say that someone comes in with issue X, like working on speech, and I address it the same way as the next person, what I actually do is I look at their system, what's going on in their system. So it could be all the way at the base, in between the feet is where our malchut is held. It could be malchut, which is our physical kingdom. It's this world. So it contains the four elements, which is fire, earth, air, water. And each of those have a way we live that helps balance them. And one of those is speech.
Mm.
Fire is speech. So I would look at their fire element actually through the lens of Malchut if I was drawn to that, to see what's going on there. Is it too strong in their system or is it too weak in their system? And how can we balance it? However, it might be that I'm brought to Yesod. If we rise up one level
Hmm.
in the system, Yesod is right over the lower pelvic floor, like pubic bone in the center of the center line. And then I'm looking at, if Yesod is the foundation, I'm looking at the foundation of this person, meaning everything that went into who they became.
Wow.
So what was their childhood like? And this is where I go deep into inner child work often. If there's a block in Yesod, if there's a reason in Yesod. So maybe they're having trouble just excessive talking because in their childhood they were never paid attention to, so they just learned to keep going, or it has to show me where to go. That makes sense?
Yes, totally. You're coming blank with no agenda, and the body will speak to you, and their energy will speak. I love that.
Well, yeah, yeah. Wherever the block or the weakness or the tikkun work for them is.
That's amazing. And what happens when you get some cynics walking through your door? How do you navigate that? Because I live in a house full of very, very skeptical men. And even this topic might throw people off. How do you sort of, I mean, I know you can't force anything down someone's throat, and no one has to go along this route. But when you find it to be beneficial, how do you navigate people who are just like already made up their minds?
Let's say I don't.
Mm,
I let them be. If I can be helpful to them, that's great. My favorite way to get through to them would be let them experience it.
yeah,
Sometimes, like I've had, it's a funny thing to say. My experience is it's more often men who are cynical,
yeah.
or I would say closed off to this.
Hmm.
So the men who come and I just put a needle in and they feel a line of energy go up their leg and they're like, whoa, what's that? That's energy. So they're being introduced in a very experiential, practical way.
Wow. It sells itself, basically. You don't have to say much, you know?
Yes, and I don't need to say much anyway. Let them be cynical, but if I could help them, that's great. Also, over time, I will say that the more I became comfortable in what I do, in who I am, in a world that it's so different from how most people seek out to heal, the more I really became comfortable in that, and the more I can talk about it just naturally.
Yeah.
And some of it goes in. People are more open. I've experienced people are more open than they first seem to be.
Really. So
It's
it's
like
almost
it's
like the
like they
shallow.
yeah, they're protecting themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I
100%.
think that's where you're gonna
I
go.
see.
Yeah.
So that really brings me to another question, which is the genders. You know, you mentioned some men have, or most men might fill a specific profile of things that are stronger, maybe more defensive or more logical or facts-based. Um, I'm assuming that you're going to take this woman or man and almost navigate it quite differently, even though everyone's unique. Do you find that in the relationship work? Like what you tell the feminine aspect of the relationship won't really apply to the men.
What I tell them in terms of what? Like if I want to get the same point across, I might tell it differently.
Yes,
Is that
that's
what
what
you
I
mean?
mean. Yes, exactly right. So, how could I sharpen this
Yes.
point? In other words, and I'm trying for us practically in our own lives to be like, okay, we're sitting with, four guys, or I'm with my girlfriends, and we need to bring a point across, or I'm dealing with my husband or my son. There's a different language that I think us as women should be using, and not in a crazy forced way, just to understand what's going to sound irrational or fluffy and what really might register, and maybe less is more.
So I feel like you're talking about a system that's not as harmonized, which is most people nowadays, because we grow up in such a patriarchal system where men are trained from very young age that they're really only allowed one emotion, which is anger, and nothing else. And women are trained that it's I don't like saying this, but in a way that they need approval from men. And what I love about the style that I studied, RLT, Relational Life Therapy, is the person that I study under is like the expert at dealing with men, really dealing with men. And he says men can be relational with a gun to their head. And that's one of my favorite sayings that a man, says. A man can be relational with a gun to his head. So I do take a very different approach with men or women as I'm feeling them out, because most men aren't as connected to their emotional centers. But I do call women out also at being too connected to their emotional
Mm,
center. Like, how much can a man take if we're
yeah.
going to go on? And I've gone through this in my own relationship where we've had to teach each other. I've had to teach the value, and I talk about this to women a lot also. Women have to teach the value of emotions,
Yeah.
but men have to teach the value of not drowning in emotions. And then we create this like, imagine like a sideways figure eight
Mm,
of teaching back and forth between the energetic systems.
yeah. That makes
So
a lot of
yes,
sense.
there's a difference,
Hmm.
but I'm also very honest. I'm very honest to couples, and I'll tell them that difference in front of both of them.
It's really interesting because, during this whole war with Iran, my husband was supposed to be overseas and he just got home, thank God, and it's been so nice. And he's like, "Wait, don't you want to hang out with me?" And I was like, "Of course I do." I was so happy to see him and I realized, wow, I had to really get masculine during this war and just function and survive. And I don't need anyone right now because I wanted everyone to feel safe, basically. And I realized I took on such a male role that he had no place here to give me. And I had to sort of now figure out what it means to sort of receive again. And I'm sure that there's so many of us that have both of these forces going through us. How would you speak to that? How do women also give up some of that masculinity, even though it's necessary and so many times to let the guy sort of find his place in this couple or this marriage?
So I hope it's okay to oppose that. I don't
Please.
think women should be giving up. I think a woman's personality, some have a different blend of feminine and masculine within. So if you're presenting very masculine, I actually think that we want to work with the male to rise up and meet her where she is.
Yeah.
And if a male is very even emotionally aggressive, masculine, and very maybe controlling, we want to help the woman rise up to meet where he is. So when we see that imbalance, like one is exerting more power than the other, we want the one who's more powerful to come down,
Mhm.
and the one who's experienced in this balance is, if more weaker, to rise up. But the situation you presented is different than most daily relationships experience, right? It
Yeah.
was a time of deep stress. And it shows that you have it in you. Like, we have that in us. And then I look back at the whole system. Why are we living in a system where men are seeing women as weaker than? We're talking about the world at large. So we're still living in this system where they see that, and then women are still living in this system where they give credit to that.
Yeah.
So part of the balance is bringing one down and the other up, but um, the weaker one needs the space to really be. We don't want to take away from their strength.
I
We want
love
them to
that.
go live that strength.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. You're not looking to break anyone down. When you say the other spouse or friend will learn to rise up and meet them where they are, I just imagine that you're celebrating all the change that people are having instead of trying to put them back into some sort of box, which really speaks to me in a big way. Because I respected that about myself. I'm like, this is how I got through this. You're right. I probably always had that strength in me. And I also start to wonder if it's cultural, because I do see where I grew up, which was the States, and I now live in Israel for like 15 plus years. I noticed tremendous, I guess, different cultural norms for the genders. I imagine you see that too. Maybe it's army service or what they're dealing with, but the women here are much stronger, or at least on the surface, compared to sort of what we were internalizing when I was growing up. Would you agree or
I do
disagree?
feel that. I
I do
do.
feel
I do
that.
feel that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
healthy.
And I've also been here a long time, and it's nice to absorb some of that.
Yeah, when I first moved here, my mom said, "There's one good thing you're really doing." And I said, "What is that?" And she goes, "Israeli men love their mothers." And I only have boys. They just shamelessly. And I'm like, "Oh my God, it's true." And that was like a nice little perk, you know? So let's speak a little bit about inner child work. This is my passion. I love relationship work. I love the sefirot. All of these things are like making me so excited. And I hope I'm not jumping from topic to topic. But for me, in my life, the inner child work, whether I knew I was doing it or I was doing it just out of instinct, it's been so life-changing, giving that space to that traumatized little girl that lives inside of me and seeing people around me giving space to that. Can you speak to that a little bit? And does it overlap with the sefirot?
It does overlap with the sefirot because that work is yisod. It's the sefirot of yisod that when there's trauma that has to be dealt with from early childhood, we're going to see yisod acting up or yisod being blocked in its flow or in its development for the person to come into power in yisod, which by the way also has a lot to do with independence, healthy independence of the person. So it definitely is that connection. And that piece can really hold someone's spherotic system in like a kind of static, hold them back kind of way. And I got into inner child work because I saw that the acupuncture and the energy work alone, they weren't enough.
Mm,
There was this missing piece for me, and that was the inner child work.
wow.
When I work with people, I do individuals or couples. I do as an individual, I'll do inner child work with the individual, and that'll look normal, like like similar to, any therapist who's doing inner child work. But with a couple, I'll do inner child work with the spouse in the room. And that's a really key, like huge, humongous piece of the couple's healing, if there needs to be healing, and of them moving forward.
That takes a lot of
So
bravery, I think, to be vulnerable to that point in front of a spouse. I can imagine that being intimidating and powerful at the same time.
it can be, and I have ways of working with them that I contract everything, so I say, would you like to try some experiential inner child work? And usually they say yes, even men will usually say yes.
Mm.
It's not, the first session, we don't jump right there. So we've already worked on creating a safe space and a relationship. But if they say no, I have other ways I work with them, other ways of doing inner child work that's not experiential in the sense of going inside and basically bringing out little me and putting her on my lap and having a conversation with her. There are other ways to do it.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
I'll work around that.
Do you have to do this? Is this getting too personal? Like, I find that my favorite people have gone through what I'm about to go through in terms like my son had an injury. He wants to be a physical therapist now. And I know that he'll have so much more understanding for the clients he works with. And I'm asking you kind of the same idea. Did you have to do the work on yourself first to more wholly show up for your clients?
Definitely. Definitely. I feel like starting from age 13, Hashem put me through like a series of trainings so that I could understand uh, what what real suffering is and what people go through and what healing is.
Yeah.
So at age 13, I was diagnosed with incredible depression and had to be hospitalized because I was suicidal. So it was a very sudden and very extreme place to be in, keeping in mind that I grew up I grew up in a yeshivish community.
Mm.
So like they didn't talk about depression and they didn't even at that point have many resources for a child going through depression. So I went through teenage years. I ended up being hospitalized twice and diagnosed with a whole bunch of, the whole list. Um, Anxiety disorders and sleep disorders and eating disorder and ADD, everything. And then around age 19, 18, 19, I started to work my way towards the light, literally towards the light, because until then, everything was just black, dark. I only wore black, even. My mother would always complain about that. But it was a very dark period where I left Judaism, as they call it, from that world. I went off the derech, and that was like a whole nother layer. But it wasn't even about that. It was about the things I was struggling with underneath. And Hashem needed to guide me, walk me through those years so that I can do what I do now. I don't think there's any way I could do what I do now and work with people experiencing levels of pain that they're experiencing without having experienced not always the same exact thing, but the same degrees of pain and
Wow.
suffering.
I'm blown away. I'm never speechless. I'm blown away, not from the horrors that you had to go through, but the way you framed it as a training to help other people. And obviously, those hard times weren't wasted because the light that you're spreading is probably so much greater than the darkness that you experienced. It's kind of mind blowing. I come from a similar community, and I don't think that even generally in the secular world, people didn't have the words for it, but especially in a more sheltered world, I can understand how there were no words or language to even express these things and how much shame maybe your family needlessly had to go through, even though there's no blame or fault there. I pray that the world,
Right.
I hope that the world is becoming more open at least and less embarrassed and afraid of things that everyone's going through, and it's very, very powerful. Really, really. Wow.
Yeah. And I do personally feel and the world is adjusting. And on my own, I've had conversations with rabbis over the year, and I've seen certain rabbis really opening, really beautifully opening to address this in their communities. So
Wow.
for
That's
me,
so
I see
wonderful.
shift.
Makes me really happy to hear that. I think that's exactly right. So many people talk about where the world is going and people get very troubled about it. And in my rose-colored glasses, I'm quite optimistic. I like what I see right now. So I don't know. For the most part, right? That's amazing. So now that you live in Alon Shvut and you're thriving in Israel, where does your relationship with Hashem express itself? Because you do have a very rich sort of education coming from the world that you come from. I find that me personally, I was able to also filter out what I take with me in my life and what I might leave behind. And it sounds like you've really created an authentic way to serve people and serve Hashem. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
I'm happy to try. I made a decision at a certain point that what I wanted most was a relationship with Hashem. So I began with that, with the internal. And that became pretty much the priority in my life. And then I made the next decision to not do anything without knowing why I was doing it. So from Netilat Yadayim in the morning to um, everything, every mitzvah from Shabbat to Kashrut to fast days became for years the one thing I said I will do that I don't understand is fasting. And Yom Kippur is torture for me. I just have such a hard time fasting that I always felt like Hashem, this is such a holy day. I want this day, and I feel like I'm missing out because I'm just, barely functional. However, that did get better as I got older. So that's a good a good thing that fasting got somewhat easier. And making that decision demanded that I really, really go deep. Why do I keep kashrut? It's not enough why we have kashrut, because I could find a book full of reasons for that. Um, it's why am I keeping kashrut, and that constantly evolves. So this is something that I'm constantly involved in, always deepening my relationship with Shabbat or my relationship with Nida and mikvah and everything. And the more I have a relationship with a mitzvah or a halacha, then the more that mitzvah, that halacha, is expanding me. It's like a dance that I'm doing with this specific aspect of Torah. Does that make sense?
A ton. The Kutzker Rebbe says there's nothing more dangerous than habit. And some of my students were like, what do you mean there's nothing? Like, habit is really healthy. Like, my father did it, so I did it. And I find that to maybe be tradition is so important. But if that's all you got, it's sort of a killer of spirituality. So that dance very much exists. I don't know if I'm on the level. I'm trying to make things personal and meaningful to me, but definitely by recreating something and sort of starting off on empty in this weird way, I understand why Balei Tshuva, which hopefully we all are on the highest of levels because it's so authentic and expansive. It makes a ton of sense, actually.
So it actually helped that I married a Baalei Tshuva. And my
Mm,
husband he grew up in Israel, but completely secular.
wow.
And that helped a lot. Because I grew up, I really resonates what you said about habit being dangerous. I grew up with, so you have the hot plate on Shabbat. the platter, and you don't move things like this way or that way, back and forth. And so I'll be like, oh, you can't do that. And he'll be like, why? Everything was why. And it used to
Yeah.
bother me so much because you don't.
Because you
So
don't.
even while I was seeking, he was putting in my face that there were so many things I was just accepting.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it filtered down into everything. And he was very instrumental in helping me stay on track with that.
That's
I
beautiful.
appreciate that in him.
My son is only 13, and he asked my husband yesterday, he's like, "Are we Shomer Negia?" My husband was like, "What?" And then instead of saying yes or no or whatever, he said, "Well, let's break it down. What would that mean to someone we were with, and what does that mean to us?" And without even realizing what we are talking about right now, I was like, "Wow, you really did what I hope we keep doing is opening it up for conversation, a place of safety to be honest, and then finding out why it speaks to us." Now, the pushback I know some listeners are having at the moment is what you can't understand everything. Sometimes you just do it because it's halacha and because the Chachamim said or because Hashem said. And I would answer, yeah, partly for sure. But I do think what you're saying, Raizel Devorah, is so powerful, is taking something and surrendering to this bigger power, which is Hashem, but also at the same time struggling with it. Like that's what we're meant to be doing as Jewish people.
Yeah. And staying involved, right? So if
Yes.
something didn't make sense to me, I would keep searching, keep searching.
Yeah.
I'm very privileged to have a Rav that really resonates with me and has been a huge guide for me figuring all that out and figuring everything out in general. But sometimes it's there are times where I've seen that for temporarily I could say I do this because it speaks to me. I feel it. It's doing something to me. I feel it, and that can be enough.
Yeah.
But what I found is that sooner or later, everything I'll revisit. And the answers I previously had don't always work. I'll have to find deeper, and they are there. And that was a big, big part of me in terms of answering your other question, like coming back and relating to Judaism. A big part of it was that in the world I grew up with, the Torah I was being fed wasn't matching my soul. And different soul structures need different parts of Torah or different lenses that Torah is being fed to them through. So as I got older and I began to study what does resonate with my soul, not only do I find a lot of answers there, but it was like it's like water. Like I'm a garden and it's water.
Yes, that makes so much sense to me. Have you ever heard about, the angel that is with you when you are inside your mom's womb? And I think it's the Chafetz Chaim. I don't want to misquote, but after a person leaves this world, that same angel is going to say, "Did you learn the Torah you were meant to attach to based on your soul structure? What I told you was what you were supposed to rediscover and spread to this world." And I love that so much because there is specific Torah that I have to learn because I need to know things, but it doesn't stir me. And then there's the Torah that's the sweetest, that just keeps me so close to Hashem and close to myself. And that's the stuff that I want to learn or teach or be around. And at that same spot, I've got a bunch of people near me who are rolling their eyes to that specific Torah. And so be it. Go find yours. Does that speak to you?
Yes, yes. That's one thing I try to help clients with also. Like where should you be focusing on your Torah learning if they want to be? Definitely speaks to me.
Yeah.
And there's also times where what resonated with me a year ago, it was like, wow, I might come back to that Sefer and be like, I'm not feeling this. And
Mhm.
then I have to check in, what do I need?
Yeah.
And I'll also ask Hashem. I'll ask Hashem to help me feel what I need when I come to learn, because I have all my Sfarim, and there's a lot that interests me up here in my head, a lot that I want to learn. But I'll ask Hashem, like, what's really best for me right now?
Mm.
Especially as a mom when I only have maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
It's so weird. Like, you can ask Hashem so many things. Like, you want, I don't know, win the lottery or, be healed. There are so many things we ask Hashem for. What I found in my life, and push back, if you will, but whenever I ask for something that's kind of on the side of spirituality or working on myself or show me some sort of answer, that door sort of opens and it's my choice to sort of see it for what it is. I'll hear some random thing on a podcast, or I'll even see, it doesn't matter what the source is. I'll get like not necessarily an answer, but like, that I have this awareness of
Yes,
that's it. It's pretty cool, right?
yes. It makes me so happy to hear you say that and to feel that is it's actually a really big gift to be living in a way, there's the layer of living in a way that I'm connected enough to ask,
Mm,
that my relationship with God is safe enough. I feel loved enough that I can ask. That's one layer, and it's so beautiful. And then another layer of I'm living in a way where I'm conscious to ask on a regular basis. On a regular basis, Hashem's with me, and I'm conscious of that. And
mm.
I love that. It's so beautiful. Then we look for those answers as a whole nother
Yeah.
layer.
And then life sort of becomes much more adventurous. So many question marks wherever I look. And I say this over and over again, but I think the questions sometimes are a lot more important than the answers because of the relationship that we're building and the knowledge that I'm only human. I'm trying here, but the surrender that comes from that sort of pushback makes me so happy. I wanted to touch upon your Shabbat meditations. I stumbled upon this and it really piqued my interest because if you mention how you're making every mitzvah meaningful to you specifically, do you see Shabbat being celebrated in a unique way in your household? And is it a time of meditation for you?
Good question. I do see Shabbat celebrated a little unique. I mean, I really focus on it, but it's a struggle with little kids. So it's not like a magical Shabbat experience every Shabbat. But I try to focus on what each child needs and what's going to impact them most for their future relationship with Shabbat. That's very important to me. So for one child, the dancing and the singing, we might really emphasize that. Like after I like singing L'Chadodi and I'm pulling one of my daughters and saying, "Show me your dancing," and getting her into it. Or another child might really like singing at the table and he can get really into that. So it depends what, but I'll go out of my way to do it and give them that internal connection that they'll feel wherever they are in life, whatever level of observance, wherever they are is less important to me than the connection they have inside of themselves to it. So there's a lot of focus on that. Do I get time to meditate? I do when my husband takes the kids.
Yep.
Now
That was
they're
real.
old enough, starting to be old enough in the mornings that sometimes I could say, I like to make kiddush with them, and then I could say, okay, so give Ima some time. Ima wants to daven, Ima wants to. But my 3-year-old, she still doesn't really understand.
Yeah, of course. And to each where they are. I think you made it so real and grounded, which is so beautiful and honest. I know my husband just asked me last night, like, what did you bring any values? Like when we got married, we were so young. We didn't have like any way to say, okay, this is the way we're going to live. It was all just sort of like messy from where we came from. And I said I did have one value I got from my grandfather. He made chagim special. Every yontif was like another cake or another decoration. That stuck with me much more than any education I got at school, I have to be honest. And I think that's what you're doing for your kids. You want Shabbat to be sweetness for them much more than anything else. And I think that's what stays for generations.
I love that. And this morning, I had proof of that because just this morning, my son, who's 9, mentioned Sukkot and what we do on Sukkot, which is like little side note. I'm not a big fan of processed food, so I limit it in the house. So on Sukkot, we have a tradition where I buy those like graham crackers or biscuits. I buy chocolate spread. I buy those sour stick things and they make their own little sukkot out of the cookies and the chocolate and the little sour stick things is the schach. Every sukkot, we have pictures every year of them doing that, and then they get to eat the whole thing if they want to, or whatever. So that's exactly that. We're not near Sukkot, and he mentioned it.
That's what he's going to tell his
Exactly.
grandchildren. Like this is
Yeah.
what it is. I think that's so beautiful. Raizel Devorah, speaking to you has been, I mean, I hope for everyone, but for me, you've just changed my day. You bring a lot of balance. I'm not going to say only light. You bring a lot of balance and calm to the conversation where you show up. And I heard that as I was listening to different podcasts that you do. And I'm wondering if you could just send me some links as to where people can hear more and learn more from you. And sadly, I have to end this conversation, but we can go on for hours.
Yes, I can do that. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. This has been beautiful. Stay safe and take care of everybody. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi again. If you're enjoying what you're hearing and you feel inspired or entertained and you want to share it with people you care about, please share it with your friends, your parents, whoever. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment so we can build a community together.